Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. 3 readings today. The first 2 are from The Way It Is, Luang Por Sumedho. The first one, page 86, Stillness and Response. When we began the retreat, I asked you to accept the whole of what happens within the next 2 months. Make your intention not just to have the kind of retreat that you would like to, but to open yourself to the possibility of whatever arises. Psychologically, this prepares us for the way life moves and changes. When we set our mind trying to make life into what we want, then we're always feeling frustrated when it doesn't quite go the way we would like. So try changing the attitude to one of acceptance and willingness to look at and understand experiences rather than just trying to get rid of them. You're developing this practice of stillness, this stillness which is everywhere, whether you're in a group or alone. In order to be with the silence, we have to realize the stillness, the silence. In other words, be that way. Be silent and still. If one just follows the restless sensations of the body and the proliferations of the mind, then of course silence is impossible. It can even be a threatening experience because one is so identified with the agitation and restlessness of the sensory realm and endlessly seeking to get born into it. The emphasis now is to recognize the restlessness for what it is, to no longer follow it, but to train oneself towards calm. It doesn't mean just to suppress the bodily formation and persecute it, but to train it because these bodies need to be trained with kindness. If you brutalize animals, they're not very nice, are they? They're just frightened, untrustworthy, miserable creatures. To train an animal doesn't mean you just pamper it, but you guide it. It's the same with your own body. Your body needs to be respected and guided, not to follow its restless energy and habits. But it doesn't mean you should deny it everything either. A trainer needs to be someone who's both kind and firm, not stubborn or brutal. Not kind in the sense of giving in to everything, because that's not really being kind, but caring, being concerned, having the right amount of interest, the proper attitude towards your own body and mind. How to calm the body? One way is through sweeping meditation, in which you sweep your attention through the body, concentrating on the sensations in the body as you do so. The body needs to be noticed and accepted for what it is. So we bring into consciousness even the tensions, unpleasant sensations, and sensationless parts of the body. By doing that, going from the top of the head to the soles of the feet and back up again, the body will feel relaxed. It's a very healthy meditation, and it will help to train the mind not to be caught up in conceptual proliferation and endless wandering. Then, as these formations start to calm down, we begin to feel much more aware of the silence of mind. We can abide in that emptiness more and more, where there is no self, just the present moment as it is. The stillness and silence is ever present wherever we are, no matter what condition we happen to be in. You can abide in emptiness by just standing among the barren trees of winter and looking at them without creating anything onto them. One can feel a sense of perfect calm and contentment with just being still and silent like the trees. Maybe our egos might say, well, I don't want to become like a tree. I want to express my true inner creativity, my unique personality. We listen to the inner voices that complain and grumble, the wanting to become something, that which stands out or exists. But we're not feeding these creatures, we're letting them go and moving towards the stillness and the silence. This word existence means to stand forth. Something that doesn't exist doesn't stand forth. So when we say non-existing, we're not talking about killing ourselves and no longer being alive, but no longer following the desire to stand out, to become something, to be separate. Now that sounds like a real nihilistic view. Ajahn Sumedho does not want to exist. Oh, poor man, needs to go to a psychiatrist. But non-existence does not mean we do not want to have any personalities, that we just want to become dreary, boring people. That's not it. It's the ability to abide in the subtlety of just being aware, open and sensitive, without being caught in the delusions of trying to become something else or stand out in some way. It's just realizing the peace of non-existence. Being non-existence is peaceful. And when there's non-existence and emptiness, there is the knowing, the brightness, the wisdom, awareness, clarity, enlightenment. Things are as they are, the suchness as isness. In the West, the emphasis is on being special, a unique individual, a child of God. This attitude is very much supported by culture and religion. There are the chosen people of God, the sects that feel that they have been called by Jesus and all the rest of us haven't. And they are the ones who are going to make it and live in an eternal paradise. But with all these views of being special, of being an individual, all those self-views, what happens to you? From my own experience, the result of all this was suffering. There seemed to be a tremendous investment in having a sizzling and unique personality. Sometimes I used to think, wait a minute, maybe I don't have a very nice personality. Maybe I don't have any personality. There was so much anxiety, frustration, jealousy, and fear. You didn't want to be a failure, didn't want to be a mediocrity, just be an ordinary guy. It was very painful to always be caught in that desire to become somebody. And as long as one has that desire, then one is always going to fear that you'll always become something that's not very good, because fear and desire go together. At first, this path may seem a bit hopeless. Sometimes the tendencies and habits of a lifetime towards becoming and emphasizing yourself as an individual personality are so strong that you feel you should not be that way. You should try to be nobody. But trying to be nobody is still being somebody. What I'm suggesting is not to become nobody, but to realize the truth of mind. When you can abide in truth, where you feel most at ease and peaceful, rather than in this endless round of existence in which you're always seeking to be reborn again. In all levels of existence, you'll never find contentment. They never satisfy, not even the best of them. The most blissful conditioned states, the jhanas, are still unsatisfactory for us. The Buddha made it very clear that all forms of human happiness and worldly success are really terribly disappointing because they can only temporarily gratify us. And the moment when that gratification is gone, we're caught in the same process of seeking again to be reborn, to become something else, to find another moment of happiness. And life becomes so wearisome. To live with a body with the right attitude, begin to accept it as it is, and all that it might have right and wrong in it, whether it's young or old, male or female, strong or weak. This is the path to true peacefulness. Do not seek to identify with your body or try to make it into something else. When we know truth, then at the right times we can be special according to time and place, without it becoming an attachment. One feels one can manifest and disappear according to what is needed. I'm not saying that one should just stand among the trees for the rest of one's life. One can be something that is useful and helpful to others. But it's not a permanent role that one is trying to hold on to and defend anymore. So one begins to feel a sense of freedom and ease. When I was young, I was very self-conscious. To say something in public was absolutely terrifying for me. Even when I was in the Navy, just having to raise my voice to say, "Aye, aye, sir," in public, in a roll call would have me shaking because of self-consciousness. Then I became a school teacher, teaching 8- and 9-year-old Chinese kids in North Borneo for a couple of years. That wasn't such a threat. But then becoming a monk in Thailand and eventually having to give talks to Thai people in Thai, all this self-consciousness became apparent. The highs you'd get when you felt you'd given a good talk and everybody says, "You're really good, Sumedho, you can give good Dhamma." Then sometimes I would give a really stupid talk and think, "I don't want to give another talk ever again. I didn't become a monk to give talks." But the idea was to keep watching this. Luang Por Cha would always encourage me to keep aware of the pride, the conceit, the embarrassment, and the self-consciousness that I would feel. And fortunately in Thailand, the people are such that they're just grateful for a monk giving a talk. Even if it's not a very good talk, it doesn't seem to upset them very much. They still seem quite grateful about it, so that made it quite easy. One time, at a Katina ceremony where we had to sit up all night, Ajahn Shah said, "Sumedho, you have to give a talk for 3 hours tonight." And up until that time, I'd only talked for a half hour. That was a strain, but 3 hours? And he knew. With Ajahn Shah, I always felt that if he said something, I'd do it. So I sat up on the high seat and talked for 3 hours. I had to sit there and watch people get up and leave. And I had to sit there and watch people just lie down on the floor and sleep in front of me. And at the end of the 3 hours, there were still a few polite old ladies left sitting there. And that wasn't Ajahn Shah saying, "Okay, Sumedho, go in there and bowl them over with some scintillating stuff. Entertain them, really sock it to them." I began to realize that what he wanted me to do was to be able to look at this self-consciousness, the posing, the pride, the conceit, the grumbling, the lazy, the not wanting to be bothered, the wanting to please, the wanting to entertain, the wanting to get approval. All these have come up during these talks of the past 15 years, but the meditation is one in which more and more one feels a real understanding of the suffering of a self-view. And then through that insight, one realizes the abiding in emptiness. Whenever Ajahn Shah used to give a talk, he'd sit there and close his eyes, and then he'd start talking. And what would come out would be appropriate to time and place. He said to never prepare a talk. He didn't care if they were interesting or not, just to let them come. And when there's non-existence, no self anymore, there are none of the problems we build out of what do people think of me, what do people say about me, or the rebellion. They can think what they want, I don't care. But you do really, don't you? Otherwise you wouldn't have to say that, would you? Sometimes personalities manifest at the appropriate times. As you talk, you manifest your personality. Now maybe you're still caught up in being a person in your own mind. But these are merely conditions that arise and cease and come out of fear and desire. When there is emptiness, personality still operates. It doesn't mean that we are exactly the same, like bees in a hive. There are still the myriad differences of character and personality that can manifest to be charming or whatever. But there's no delusion about them. There's no suffering. For example, when Ajahn Shah first visited England, he was invited to a certain woman's home for a vegetarian meal. She obviously had put a lot of effort in creating the most delicious kinds of food. She was bustling about, offering this food and looking very enthusiastic. Ajahn Shah was sitting there assessing the situation, and then suddenly he said, "This is the most delicious and wonderful meal I have ever had." That comment was really something, because in Thailand, monks are not supposed to comment on the food. And yet Luang Por suddenly manifested this charming character that complimented a woman who needed to be complimented because that made her feel so happy. He had a feeling for the time and place, for the person he was with, for what would be kind. So he could step out of the designated role of what is supposed to be according to a tradition and manifest in ways that are appropriate. Now that shows wisdom and the ability to respond to a situation, not to be just rigidly bound within a convention that blinds you. That was a manifestation and a disappearance too, because I've never heard him do that again. The empty mind is an abiding in ease, where there is no self, no fear, or desire to be deluded with. And yet there is the ability to respond out of compassion and kindness to the present situation in a suitable way. It's strange, isn't it? Compare the goal of nibbana, of non-existence, with that of becoming the best person in the whole world, the strongest or the most beautiful. Worldly values are about having power, beauty, wealth, but they all have their opposites, don't they? Success is always attached to failure. Happiness is always attached to unhappiness, and praise is always attached to blame. Good fortune to bad fortune. So if you choose the worldly values of wealth, power, success, and praise, you're going to get the others going along with them because they're like two sides of the same coin. You can't separate the one from the other. Worldly values are never really going to allow you to feel at ease. The world is an unsafe place. It's not peaceful, and it's not where we really belong. You only begin to understand and realize peace through emptiness, non-existence, not self. And this is not annihilation, but enlightenment, freedom, true peace, true knowledge. Patience, page 59. Peacefulness and tranquility can be incredibly boring and can bring up a lot of restlessness and doubt. Restlessness is a common problem because the sensory realm is a restless realm. Bodies are restless and minds are restless. Conditions are changing all the time. So if you're caught up in reacting to change, you're just restless. Restlessness needs to be thoroughly understood for what it is. The practice is not one of just using the will to bind yourself to the meditation mat. It's not a test of you becoming a strong person who has to conquer restlessness. That attitude just reinforces another egotistical view. But it's a matter of really investigating restlessness, noticing it and knowing it for what it is. For this, we have to develop patience. It's something we have to learn and really work with. When I first went to Wapapong, I couldn't understand Lao. And in those days, Ajahn Chah was at his peak and giving 3-hour dasanas every evening. He could go on and on and on, and everybody loved him. He was a very good speaker, very humorous, and everybody enjoyed his talks. But if you couldn't understand Lao, I'd be sitting there thinking, when's he going to stop? I'm wasting my time. I'd be really angry thinking, I've had enough, I'm leaving. But I couldn't get enough nerve to leave, so I would just sit there thinking, I'll go to another monastery. I've had enough of this. I'm not going to put up with this. And then he would look at me. He had the most radiant smile, and he'd say, are you all right? And suddenly all the anger that had been accumulating for that 3 hours would completely drop away. Now that's interesting, isn't it? After sitting there fuming for 3 hours, it can just go. So I vowed that my practice would be patience, and that during this time I would develop patience. I'd come to all the talks and sit through all of them as long as I could physically stand it. I determined not to miss them or to try to get out of them and just practice patience. And by doing that, I began to find that the opportunity to be patient was something that has helped me very much. Patience is a very firm foundation for my insight and understanding of the Dhamma. Without that, I would just have wandered and drifted about, as you see many people doing. Many Westerners come to Wapapong and drifted away from it because they weren't patient. They didn't want to sit through 3-hour dasanas and be patient. They wanted to go to the places where they could get instant enlightenment and get it done quickly in the way they wanted. Through the selfish desires and ambitions which can drive us, even on the spiritual path, we can't really appreciate the way things are. When I reflected and actually contemplated my life at Wapapong, I realized that it was a very good situation. There was a good teacher, there was enough to eat, the monks were good monks, the lay people were very generous and kind, and there was encouragement towards the practice of Dhamma. This is as good as you can get. It was a wonderful opportunity. And yet so many Westerners couldn't see that because they tended to think, I don't like this, I don't want that, it should be otherwise. And what I think is, what I feel is, and I don't want to be bothered with this and that. I remember going up to Tum Seng Pet Monastery, which was a very quiet, secluded place in those years, and I lived in a cave. A villager built me a platform because in the bottom of this cave was a big python. One evening I was sitting on this platform by candlelight. It was really eerie, and the light cast shadows on all the rocks. It was weird, and I started to get really frightened, and then suddenly I got startled. I looked up, and there was a huge owl right above, looking at me. It looked immense. I don't know if it was that big, but it seemed really enormous in the candlelight, and it was looking straight at me. I thought, well, what's there to be really frightened of here? And I tried to imagine skeletons and ghosts, or Mother Kali with fangs and blood dripping out of her mouth, or enormous monsters with green skin. And then I began to laugh because it got so amusing. I realized I wasn't really frightened at all. In those days, I was just a very junior monk, and one night Ajahn Chah took me to a village fete. I think Satyamanto Bhikkhu was there at the time. We were very serious practitioners, and we didn't want any kind of frivolity or foolishness. And of course, going to a village fete was the last thing we wanted to do, because in these villages, they love loudspeakers. Anyway, Ajahn Chah took Satyamanto and me to this fete, and we had to sit up there all night in the raucous sounds of the loudspeakers and monks giving talks all night long, and I kept thinking, oh, I want to go back to my cave. Green-skinned monsters and ghosts are much better than this. I noticed that Satyamanto, who was incredibly serious, was looking really angry and critical and very unhappy. We just sat there looking miserable. I thought, why does Ajahn Chah bring us to these things? Then I began to see for myself. I remember sitting there thinking, here I am getting all upset over this. Is it that bad? What's really bad is what I'm making out of it. What's really miserable is my mind. Loudspeakers and noise and distraction and sleepiness. I can put up with, but it's that awful thing in my mind that hates it, resents it, and wants to leave. That's the real misery. That evening I saw what misery I could create in my mind over things that actually I could bear. I remember that as a very clear insight into what I thought was miserable and what really is miserable. At first I was blaming the people, the loudspeakers, the disruption, the noise, and the discomfort. I thought that was the problem. Then I realized that it wasn't. It was my mind that was miserable. If we reflect on and contemplate Dhamma, we learn from the various situations which we like the least, if we have the will and the patience to do so. This last piece is from Awareness Itself, which is a collection of short fragments of teachings and sayings from Luang Por Sumedho, who's a disciple of Ajahn Lee Damodaro and was Ajahn Geoff's teacher. This chapter is called Righted Awareness. Whatever you experience, simply be aware of it. You don't have to take after it. The primal heart has no characteristics. It's aware of everything. But as soon as things make contact, within or without, they cause a lapse in mindfulness, so that we let go of awareness, forget awareness in and of itself, and take on all the characteristics of the things that come later. Then we act out in line with them, becoming happy, sad, or whatever. The reason we're this way is because we take conventional truths and latch onto them tight. If we don't want to be under their influence, we'll have to stay with primal awareness at all times. This requires a great deal of mindfulness. What really is yours? When you die, you won't be able to take any of these things with you. So why waste time wanting anything? There's nothing you have to want at all. Make your mind quiet. Make it one. You don't have to concern yourself with your own attainments or those of other people. Simply be aware. That's enough. Whenever anything hits you, let it only go as far as aware. Don't let it go all the way into the heart. All you need to do is keep your sense of simple awareness solid and strong, and nothing will be able to overwhelm you. Stay with awareness itself at all times, except when you sleep. The minute you wake up, stay right at awareness, and it won't be long before discernment arises. One woman who practiced meditation with Ajahn Fuang came to feel that she had split into two people, one person acting and one watching. She felt this way both while sitting in meditation and while she wasn't, to the point where she didn't feel like sitting in meditation at all, because she felt that sitting and not sitting were in no way different. She asked him about this, and he told her, if you don't want to, you don't have to sit. Just keep this sense of the watcher going at all times. Sitting with your eyes closed is simply an external convention. Just keep watching. When the mind and the body become separate like this, the body can't press on the mind. If the body presses on the mind will have to be under the influence of what goes on in the body. There's no past here and no future, only the present. No man, no woman, no sign of any kind at all. There's nothing, not even self. What self there is only a conventional sense. Focus on all six of the elements: earth, water, wind, fire, space, and consciousness. When you're acquainted with each of them, meld them into one and focus on them until they grow stable and strong. Your energy will gather together until both the body and the mind feel full. When the physical elements are balanced and in harmony, they grow full, and the mind will let go of them on its own and turn to oneness. The elements will be one, the mind will be one. So now you turn your attention to the mind. Focus on the mind until you become fully aware of it. Then let go of that awareness, together with whatever knowledge you've gained, and there won't be anything left. Let go even of the events in the present that you're aware of. That's when intuitive discernment will arise, and meditation comes to an end.
I have a question for Luang Por. Ajahn Sumedho has a lot of stories about, in the beginning wanting to do formal meditation and not necessarily being able to do as much of that, and being tested a lot by Luang Por Cha. I was wondering if you had a similar experience when you began practice there.
What comes to mind, one time when I, early on, I went to Wat Pah Pong and and a morning. I'm a morning person. I like sitting in the morning, and then the morning chanting was really long, and so that and it would be you sit from 3 to 4, and then chant from about 4 to 5. And so even when you went to sit, then people would be sort of coming in at odd times. So it was the hall was never quite still. So I just stayed in my kuti after a while and just meditated, practiced, in my opinion, diligently. And then and Luang Por Chah wasn't going to pujas. He'd do it from time to time. Luang Por Chah showed up in morning puja, and then he actually asked in the meeting, where's that Pesalo? And is either Luang Por Liam or Luang Por Chu. I said, oh, he's just, he never comes. And Luang Por Chah is right in the middle of everybody. He's just really lazy. And of course that got back to me pretty quick. all my mates were quick to tell me. So is that so then I started going to the pujas.
This little chapter from Luang Por Sumedho is, obviously very similar to a lot of Luang Por Doom's teachings. Mm-hmm. The question is essentially, is it really that simple?
It is that simple if your mind is simple. That in that sense, if the mind is clear, then it's that simple. That was. It's like that in that the ballad of the liberation from the khandhas of Luang Por Man is sort of it's like the khandhas are the khandhas. It's just like the mind is the mind. That's all. And something like that. I can't remember. But it was, something that was a very bold statement and very, very direct. Of course, it's. But there's a lot of, a lot of training that is required to get one to that point. A lot of letting go.